أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear students, today's lesson is a continuation of the lesson from last week, from Unit 3, Lesson 1. This is Unit 3, Lesson 2, Important Principles Concerning Allah's Beautiful Names. Okay, so what are we going to learn in this lesson? So the objective of this lesson is to learn a few more principles regarding our understanding as Muslims about the attributes of Allah. So specifically, what is the methodology of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah concerning Allah's names? And what is the methodology of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah concerning Allah's attributes? Now you must be wondering, what does Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah refer to here? In the Muslim world, there are many groups that claim to, follow Islam, to follow the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. But the Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah basically refers to the majority, the group that practices their deen according to the understanding of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, and those that have followed them in righteousness, in goodness, with knowledge. So our understanding of the principles concerning Allah's names and attributes are based on the majority, Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Okay? So the first principle regarding Allah's names and attributes that we must keep in mind is that Allah's names are complete and perfect, without deficiency. So all of Allah's attributes are complete and perfect, and none of them describe Allah with any deficiency or imperfection. This principle is supported by, number 1, the Quran, number 2, sound reason, and number 3, natural disposition of man. And so what evidence do we have to prove that Allah's names and attributes are complete and perfect, and they're devoid or they're without any deficiency, weakness, or imperfection? Well, the strongest evidence, obviously, is the word of Allah Himself, the original word of Allah that has been preserved in the Quran. Allah says in Surah Al-Nahl, verse 60, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, لِلَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ مَثَلُ السُّوءِ وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. For those who do not believe in the hereafter is the description of evil, and for Allah is the highest attribute, and He is exalted in might, the wise. So Allah is saying here, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. For Allah is the highest attribute. So what does that mean? Attribute refers to the qualities of Allah. Allah is Ar-Rahman, He is merciful. Allah is all knowledgeable. Allah is all seeing. Allah is all hearing. As-Sami' wal-Basir. So regarding this, Allah is saying that Allah has the highest qualities. Of these qualities, Allah possesses the highest forms of these qualities. So for instance, we also share some qualities with Allah. Let's say human beings Allah has given us human faculties to learn, to possess, to acquire knowledge. But there are people that have some knowledge. There are people that have a bit more knowledge. Some have, a lot of knowledge. But regardless of their capabilities, in terms of knowledge, their knowledge will never match the knowledge of Allah. Our knowledge compared to the knowledge of Allah is a drop in the ocean, and not even that. Our knowledge, the quality of knowledge that Allah has given us, Allah has only imparted a fraction of the knowledge that Allah possesses. And subhanAllah, with that tiny fraction of knowledge, human beings have been able to advance so much in terms of science and technology. But imagine, in spite of this is only a tiny portion of the entire knowledge that Allah possesses. So again, the attributes that Allah affirms for Himself in the Quran, all of those attributes, we must understand them in the highest form, that Allah possesses them in their most complete, in their most perfect form. Right? So and Allah is exalted and might and wise. Okay, next, now we move on to the next principle. Well, in this principle, the second evidence to support that Allah's names are complete and perfect without deficiency is sound reason. Sorry, I'll repeat that again. That in the previous slide, we saw an evidence from the Quran that supported that Allah's names and attributes are complete and perfect, and that there are no attributes that ascribe any deficiency or weakness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other piece of evidence is from just sound reasoning. How do we know that Allah is perfect, is complete, and is without deficiency? Is just through reasoning yourself, you know. So everything in existence that we see around us, that we examine, you know, possesses attributes of perfection or deficiency, or both together. You know, humans, we have some attributes of perfection, but we also have deficiency. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of all that exists in the universe, from the stars and planets to every living creature. The point of mentioning this is that when you look at the stars and the planets, you know, you see amazing beauty. You see, you know, Allah's beauty in the way that He's created the universe. And then you have living creatures. You know, some creatures are ugly, some are beautiful. But even within human beings, right? We have, even though human beings have been created in the best of images, but you know, we have to eat, sleep, we have to relieve ourselves. So we have deficiencies as well. But it is impossible for Allah, the Creator, to possess any attributes of deficiency Himself. If Allah has created the universe and everything inside the universe, and you know, the planet Earth, the conditions that have to exist to allow human beings to live in planet Earth have to be perfect. And of course, Allah is behind tuning the universe so that we can live on planet Earth. And so this is an example of Allah's perfection. Allah subhanahu is the creator of perfection in the world, so the highest form of all the attributes that Allah has affirmed belong to Allah alone. So it is impossible that Allah, who has created this perfect universe, can possess any deficiencies in Himself. If that were the case, then, like the example that I gave you, then for instance, we could not even live on planet Earth, because the conditions that have to exist to allow us to live on planet Earth are very, very fine margins that we're talking about. The other proof for Allah's names and attributes being perfect and complete and without any deficiency is the natural disposition of man. In Arabic, this is known as fitra. Inside every human being, when a child is born, Allah places this quality known as the fitra. And what is this fitra? It is an inclination that is within all of us, you know, whether it's a Muslim or a non-Muslim. There is a quality that Allah places in all of us to want to know Allah, to want to draw closer to Allah, to glorify the Creator. But this quality also leads us to develop feelings of love and awe and admiration towards Allah. These feelings of love and awe that ultimately lead one to worship Allah emerge because the Creator is completely perfect and does not possess any deficiency or imperfection. So we have this quality to want to know Allah, to want to worship Allah. But in part that exists because the Creator is perfect, is free of any deficiencies. So the feeling of love, awe, and admiration come naturally as a result of the nature of God and His perfection. To understand this properly, or in a better way, you know, in life we respect and admire people because of their achievements. There are, you know, celebrities and and athletes have a lot of followers and a lot of fans. And the reason why they have so many people that admire them is because, they have been able to, reach levels of ability that normal people cannot reach. So other people recognize that they are special, they have special qualities, and that's why they love and respect and are in admiration of them. And unfortunately, some people have a bit too much love and have a bit too much respect for these celebrities and these athletes or intellectual people, to the point where they listen to them for guidance when it comes to matters of life. As a Muslim, as a believer, right, we we should only look to Allah for guidance. That the feeling of love, admiration, and awe that leads us to worship something should only be reserved for Allah, because Allah is complete. So if there's an athlete and celebrity that possesses qualities of perfection, right? Um, of course, that needs to be recognized, but we should not go to the point of worshipping them, because they are still deficient, like we said before. But only Allah is free of any imperfections. Only Allah is completely perfect. So only Allah deserves the full love and awe and devotion and worship, not human beings. So this is another example, another proof for Allah's names and attributes being free of any deficiencies. Okay, so the next principle that we are going to learn about is the attributes of Allah are of two types. Remember, now we're referring to Allah's qualities, the nature of Allah. So the nature of Allah are of two types. Specifically, this is being referred to the attributes that Allah has affirmed for Himself, right, in the Quran, or that we have been instructed by the Prophet of Allah ﷺ in his Sunnah. And also the attributes that Allah has negated for Himself, or that the Prophet ﷺ has negated in the Sunnah. Okay? So there are two types. The attributes that must be affirmed. So these are attributes of perfection that Allah used to describe Himself in His book and in the Sunnah. So we have covered this in detail in the past. For instance, from the verse in Surah An-Nur, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. He is the all-hearing and all-seeing. That is an attribute. The other attribute is that Allah is Ar-Rahman, He is merciful. This is so these are attributes that Allah has affirmed for Himself, and so that's one type. Then there are attributes that must be negated, and again, these are attributes that Allah has negated for Himself in the Quran, or the Prophet of Allah ﷺ has negated about Allah. Right? These are not things that we make up ourselves. These have been revealed to us in the authentic texts, so the Quran and the Sunnah. So I think it's pretty clear why we must affirm the attributes that Allah has affirmed for Himself. That's pretty clear. But then what about the attributes that Allah has negated? Allah has said, no, these are not my attributes. These do not make up my attributes. Why is this important? The reason why this is important is to appreciate the qualities, the attributes that Allah has affirmed for Himself. Sometimes it is necessary to first understand what Allah is not. So by rejecting certain attributes of deficiency, we can then fully understand the completeness and perfection of Allah. So example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates the attributes of ignorance, death, and weakness from Himself, we can better understand His perfect attributes of knowledge, immortality, and strength. So I mean, we know that Allah is ever present. He's omnipotent. He's ever present. But then when Allah negates an attribute, it makes us fully understand. When Allah says that He always existed, He has no beginning or end, He does not die, then we understand the full glory, the full magnificence, and majesty of Allah. So this is why it's very important for us to also know the attributes that Allah has negated, but then also then fully appreciate and glorify Allah, and to understand His majesty, that His attributes are complete and perfect. So when Allah says that He is powerful, He is the most powerful. He never sleeps. He never gets tired. He never gets fatigued. So this is why it's important to also know the attributes that must be negated. So Allah has no ignorance. And He's not someone who dies, and there's no weakness in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next principle is that the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that must be affirmed are classified into two categories. Now, in the last slide, we looked at that the attributes of Allah are of two types: the attributes that must be affirmed and the attributes that must be negated. Here we're talking about the attributes that must be affirmed. They are of two categories. The first one, and the attributes that refer directly to Allah's nature, right? The essence of Allah, the nature of Allah. So Allah possesses wisdom, right? Allah possesses knowledge. Allah is lofty. He is exalted. So these are attributes that refer to the nature of Allah. This is how we know our Rabb, and that we know that He is complete and perfect, and that He is all powerful, and that when we want to turn to someone, we turn to Allah because He's free of deficiency. He has power, He has wisdom, He has knowledge. Only He has the ability to grant you what you desire. Only He has the ability to remove any pain and suffering and evil from your life. Not others, not any other creation. And this is why Allah alone is deserving of our worship. Allah alone is deserving of the type of love and awe and admiration that leads someone to worship someone else. Remember, I said in a couple of slides back, that even human beings possess qualities of perfection, but of course it's not complete perfection. It is a limited type of perfection. So human beings possess knowledge, right? Human beings possess power, but it's limited in each case. But when we see someone that has more knowledge and has more power than us, such as an intellectual, such as an athlete, yes, we should acknowledge it, we should appreciate it, but that love and awe and the admiration that follows should not lead us to worship of that thing, because that love, that awe, that admiration should only be reserved for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is complete and perfect and free of any deficiencies. So that covers the attributes that refer directly to Allah. But then there's another category of attributes that we must affirm, and they refer to Allah's actions. So that might not be clear, but hopefully when I cover these bullet points, that will become more clear. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills something or desires to perform an action, we attribute those actions to Him as well. Some examples of this can be found, in His descending in the last third of the night, or in the Quran, Allah says He ascends above His throne. So these attributes, right, refer to actions, and not so much as so that refers to Allah's attributes when it comes to His actions. But at the same time, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not choose to perform those actions, we do not ascribe it to Him. Again, we do not use our imagination, we do not use our perception, our senses, to attribute things that Allah has not attributed to Himself. And that applies to both the nature of God, so the first part, the ilm, or in terms of His actions. We only affirm that which Allah has affirmed for Himself, and we do not go beyond that at all. The next and last one, so the last principle concerning Allah's names and attributes, is that the attributes of Allah are based exclusively upon the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. And I know that I have repeated this point multiple times, And although it appears to be a simple point, but it's an important point because in the past, in history, there have been certain groups that have strayed away from guidance as a result of not limiting their understanding of God based on what Allah has revealed. They decided to use, their human faculties, their imagination, to come up with what Allah might be. So as Muslims, there's absolutely no need to use our human faculties to understand the nature of Allah, because we can instead rely upon the Quran and Sunnah. Allah has given us sufficient information about who He is, and we do not need any more information about Allah except that which has been revealed in the Quran and has been told to us by the Prophet ﷺ and the Sunnah. And remember again, I'll repeat this again, that there have been certain groups in the past that have had a flawed understanding about the nature of God, and as a result, they have been condemned as a result of straying away from the understanding of Tawheed when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah. So it's an obligation upon the believers to accept the attributes of perfection that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has affirmed for Himself without interpretation. So not only do we base the names and attributes of Allah from the Quran and Sunnah, but also we must accept the names and attributes of Allah without without any interpretation or adding or subtracting from it. So this concludes the lesson on the important principles concerning the names and attributes of Allah. And there is an exercise at the end of this chapter, at the end of this topic, that contains some true and false statements. And you should be able to, from what you've learned, complete those. I will finish here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.